Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to sculpt your future and step into your power, then do we have the 1000 Show Happy Birthday Miracle Club show for you. Today I'll be talking with Mitch Horowitz, a leader in the New Thought movement, PEN Award-winning historian, the author of Occult America and One Simple Idea, and a phenomenal must-read new book on intending and sculpting your future, The Miracle Club. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about finding your path, stepping forward, and making the really big decisions to sculpt a standout life. That, plus we'll talk about young Israel of New Hyde Park, and, gotcha, and what in the world does Ayn Rand, Sid Vicious, Satan, Karl Marx, gratitude, and Winnie the Pooh have to do with anything? That can only mean one thing. We're welcoming back Mitch Horowitz. So welcome back to the show, Mitch. Are you ready to shine?
I am, and I'm burning with curiosity to hear about Winnie the Pooh. Karl Marx and Ayn Rand and Satan is all familiar territory, but this Winnie the Pooh thing, you've really thrown me for a loop on.
Well, and I'm not the biggest Pooh expert, but I was trying to think of a character who maybe exemplifies a little bit of a New Thought movement and has kind of a shadow self that tags along with him that's looking at the alternate side of things. And so what was interesting today and how I make a connection is I was reading an article on gratitude. And it's the day after Thanksgiving we're recording this. Mm-hmm. And you were saying that gratitude isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, interesting. Oh, there's so much to look at there. First of all, obviously, I think gratitude is and can be an extremely important part of life. But the critique I have of the gratitude movement and some of the popular books that support the idea of gratitude as a way of life is that they too often draw their examples from the lives of people who are reasonably safe, reasonably prosperous, reasonably healthy, reasonably stable. And for a philosophical principle to really be useful, you have to be able to take it to the streets. It has to be applicable in the lives of all people at all times in one way or another. So telling somebody who's stricken with a chronic disease to write a novel, or telling somebody who is unable to make a car payment to start a blog or something like that. And that is the kind of advice that you'll encounter in some of these books. Not that I'm running it down, but I'm saying that that kind of advice is not always going to fit the situation of somebody who is facing really desperate circumstances. But my contention is that the gratitude philosophy has to grow and has to mature, as New Thought does, to reach people who are in extreme need. We have to be able to say to people who may be suffering from a terminal illness from which they may not recover, that there are certain cases where you've suffered staggering grief or staggering loss, where life may be hereafter a half loaf of bread, so to speak. But it is infinitely better to consume a half loaf of bread, if that's what it must be, standing fully erect internally, being grateful and thankful and appreciative for the sacrifices that others have made to sustain you to this point, seeking out every potentiality, every possibility. And you will feel, I believe, from within your own self, a strengthened sense of nobility, character, dignity, destiny. And my wish in this article that you're referencing, and it's in the Washington Post, it just came out a couple of days ago, my wish is not the gratitude movement go away, not at all. My wish is that the gratitude movement be braver, bolder, more daring, more mature, take greater risks, and do more heavy lifting so that it can address the lives of people who are really, really in dire, severe situations that may not turn around, and life still has to be lived from within these situations.
What does that mean to you to do more of the heavy lifting?
To do more of the heavy lifting, and I attempt to do this in the Miracle Club, I do my best. To do more of the heavy lifting means to address people who are facing really severe or catastrophic economic circumstances, health challenges, mental illnesses, disorders that are not going to go away without a multifaceted form of treatment, or I shouldn't say not going to go away, but that are not going to prove manageable without a multifaceted form of treatment. For example, I write about the experience of somebody who is coping with a lifelong diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Nobody is going to be able to get through bipolar disorder at this juncture in history and in our lives without a combination of treatments, including psychopharmacology, including, from my perspective, the mental therapeutics that you and I talk about on this show, including, depending on their person's outlook, a spiritual life, very similar to what you and I talk about on this show. And we need to be able to address the lives of people who are facing circumstances that require a lifetime of management. This includes people who are contending with end-of-life issues, who have chronic diseases. Right now, just this morning, I began an exercise, a 10-day exercise, with a young man in northern Ohio who has ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. This is a disease that, according to everything we know, he is going to be managing for the rest of his life. And he has to go through tremendous effort just to bathe by himself. He has to go through tremendous effort to use a computer. He actually has a computer program that responds to eye movements. So he's able to use the movement of his eyes to type, but it takes him a very, very long time to type an email that otherwise might require 5 minutes, to dash off. And he's had to stop using social media because he felt that social media, it was depressing him. It was reminding him too much of things that were difficult for him to do. Anyway, he's a wonderful person. He wrote me this extraordinary note just filled with honor and dignity and good observation and self-analysis and self-criticism. And I have an exercise. I'll be very happy to share it with your viewers. And it's called the 10-Day Miracle Challenge. And he and I are doing this 10-Day Miracle Challenge together. And I would invite everybody listening to do it with me and to try it with me. I believe very strongly that we should all be experimenting with these things together. I always want to remind people that I'm a seeker, I'm an experimenter, I'm chronicling what I find, but I'm not some sort of a teacher or a guru. I mean, we are here as part of a group. We are in a group. I'm chronicling it, you're chronicling it, others are, but we're all, in this boat rowing. And if we're not rowing, then we're not helping and we're not being helped. So here's the exercise, and it's very, very simple. But as with everything simple, it has to be done with total passion and total dedication. So I came upon this exercise, or I came to it several weeks ago when someone wrote to me and she told me she had been struggling with something, and she was having a terrible day and she just didn't know where to turn. And in all honesty, I was at the time having a crappy day myself. And heaven forbid if the time ever comes where I don't admit to having a bad day or a sleepless night or an argument or to being obnoxious to somebody and feeling horrible about it or something, happens constantly. I don't want anybody, in my circle of seekers who doesn't acknowledge that, because when you stop acknowledging that, you stop acknowledging how far all of us have to go. So she wrote to me and she said, she was really struggling with some very serious life issues. And the day that she wrote to me, she said, this just happens to be a very low day and I don't know what I can do. And I said, listen, I'm having a very low day too. And I am not a stranger to the struggles you're dealing with. I was out of town at the time. I was in Boulder, Colorado, not far from you. I was having a sleepless night. There were just a variety of things on my mind. And so I said to her, listen, I want you and I to sit down together, draw up a 10-day grid, and I want you to think of something that you really, really want with total passion. And I mean really want. And I want to circle back to that. And let's drop our 10-day grid. And for each of these 10 days together, let's make an intensive focus on each of our desires. We don't have to disclose our desires to one another. And in some respects, it's better not to, because sometimes people's desires are very intimate, they're very personal, they're very private, and they're yours. And I don't want anybody to feel deterred or stifled or put off by having to share publicly something that may be exquisitely private. We must work together, but working together doesn't mean that you have to bear to me or that I have to bear to you every aspect of my being or engage in some kind of morbid self-disclosure. Yeah. And again, I want to remember to come back to this because there's an important point within that. So we both did this. She went off and dwelt upon her desire. I went off and dwelt upon mine. And I said, these 10 days are a period of time to pray, to meditate, to affirm, to think about options, to occupy the feeling state of your desire fulfilled, to use every exercise that has come down to us in the field of modern mind metaphysics. Mark off these 10 days on a grid. And here's the key thing. This is the key part of the exercise. Be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for unexpected, unusual, or strange ways that your wish may come to pass, may come to actualization. Because my contention is that sometimes we are presented with opportunities for deliverance and we overlook them because they are so different in nature from the channel through which we expected something to reach us. Or we may be getting what we want in a sense of emotional fulfillment or even financial fulfillment or even career fulfillment, but it is different in its specifics from the very thing we zeroed in on. Now, I selected something for myself that was very intimate and private. And the first couple of days, I was really nervous because I felt I had stuck my neck out in an almost unrealistic way. But I must tell you, and I must say to you and your listeners with all candor, that by the third, fourth day of this 10-day exercise, intellectually, my mind started turning and going in new directions and exploring options. And I found something that in many regards covered the bases I was looking to cover. But it came from an unusual direction, a very, very unusual direction. And if I had stubbornly held out for my wish, my desire coming to me through some other channel, or coming to me in a manner that seemed more miraculous and more burning bush, I would have neglected my very means of deliverance. Now, this young man I'm working with, I don't know, and I didn't ask him to disclose to me what his wish is. But we both made the promise that we would follow this program, and we both made the promise that we would be vigilant, we would be on the lookout for opportunities for the fulfillment or the deliverance of what we want, and we would reject no possibilities. So I invite everybody, your entire Inspire Nation, to try this exercise. It requires a pencil, a piece of paper, a heartfelt wish, a grid of 10 boxes, 10 consecutive days, an absolute commitment to dwell upon this wish with every mental therapeutic tool we possess and be vigilant, overlook nothing. Even if you think something conventional reaches you and you're like, that's not quite it. Take a yellow light, be careful, reject nothing out of hand, because sometimes when we are absolutely determined, I think it's almost lawful that the thing we need can reach us, even if it's through a very unusual channel, or even if it's not the precise definition of what we started out with.
It makes me think of a few things. First off, Tony Robbins, many years ago, maybe like 20 years ago, of each day, you want a job, you want some source of income, of writing out like 5 or 10 possibilities each day. And I've morphed it into my own thing. So I've got to try to remember what was Tony, what was mine. But the idea being that if you challenge yourself each day to come up with new ideas and come up with new ideas and come up with new ideas, you get to the ridiculous. And then somewhere in the ridiculous, if you don't if you don't filter it all out, something special pops that
That's
is
fascinating.
outside of your current filter, outside of your current paradigm, because you've
Yeah.
exhausted your paradigm and you just
Yes.
keep going.
I love that expression. I want everybody listening to hear that expression you just used. You've exhausted your paradigm. You've exhausted your paradigm. That's wonderful, because when you get that's another way of saying that you've broken through the conventional. You've expended every resource you thought you had, and it compels you to think in new directions, radically new directions. That's exhaust your paradigm. I love that. I'm going to get that tattooed on me today somewhere. Exhaust your
That's
paradigm.
a huge honor.
Seriously, where should that go? The neck? Yeah. So, exhaust your paradigm. I love that. Yeah.
So we'll make T-shirts. We'll do it a little bit more, well, organic cotton, something maybe even
Right.
post-consumer recyclable.
I love that.
So,
or we can make like a MAGA hat with it, but it'll say exhaust your paradigm. I like that.
very cool. We'll talk. What exercises were you doing during your so because one of the I love where we're going with this 10-day miracle challenge. If I was to give my audience a 10-day miracle challenge and say, throw the kitchen sink at it, do something each and every day, one of the challenges is if I don't give structure, if there are too many possibilities, it's too easy not to get things done. That becomes the hurdle. In fact, if I'm given a list of guests to reach out to, and Jessica goes, here's a list of 30, 40, 50 guests to reach out to, and I don't have an order or structure to it, then I was just given a mountain. If I'm told contact, 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 much easier.
Yes, I hear you. I hear you. Well, the exercises, these are the exercises I was using. And one of them related to what you were just describing with exhaust your paradigm. I love that. That's just become my new mantra, basically. The great mind-body teacher, Moshe Feldenkrais, the architect of the Feldenkrais method, he believed that you should be able to write down at least 3 ways out of every problem, that there should be no problem you're facing that about which you could not write down at least 3 concrete ways, at least, of getting out of. So one of my methods, quite frankly, was a lot like what you were just describing, and it was intellectual in nature, although, as you're suggesting, I think, when you apply yourself to something intellectually and you push yourself and you push yourself, eventually it becomes an exercise that expands beyond the intellectual. It involves your whole psyche. And you hear of this in the lives of great inventors, great novelists, great artists, where they're seeking a solution to something. And remember, a solution, what is a solution really? It's an admixture of elements. It's an admixture of elements. They're seeking a solution. They're seeking to arrive at that sense of breakthrough, and they're driving themselves so continually from a mental perspective that it becomes a physical act as well. It becomes an emotional act as well. It becomes a unifying act. So I was thinking intellectually, but going beyond the intellectual to a full, I think, psychical experience, to a full experience of the psyche, emotions, physicality, mentality, of possibilities. And one should never be afraid of that. One should never be afraid of that. Huge things have happened in our world. Huge breakthroughs have happened in people's lives because they said, I am going to sit down with a pen and paper and I am going to exhaust my paradigm. I'm going to go through every single possibility and I will neglect nothing and I will deem nothing a failure, because let's say you so-called fail, 100 times. Well, has that really been a failure? You've tested out different possibilities, even if briefly. You've experimented with different possibilities. If you're really honest with yourself, 100 things, so to speak, that won't work. Okay, that's information. That's extraordinary information. I was also using, and I've talked about this on the show with you before, I was using that period of time just before drifting to sleep at night, the hypnagogic state, very supple, very powerful, suggestible frame of mind that we enter into naturally at the start of every sleep cycle and as we're coming to in the morning. I was using that to affirm and to visualize. I literally never go to sleep at night without using those few moments of hypnagogia to affirm, to visualize. Those are the few moments of exquisite relaxation we experience just before we drift off. And you and I have talked about how both sleep researchers and psychical researchers believe that that is prime time for very unusual activity of the mind. And it's very valuable to use. And we all enter that state naturally twice a day. Now, I was writing down goals and affirmations. I was praying. Yeah. I was occupying the feeling state using the method of the great Neville Goddard. I was occupying the feeling state that I had fulfilled, I had come into, I had entered that which I desired. That's pretty much what I was doing. I was doing it for 10 days. I had other things going on in my life, of course, but there's something about the 10 days themselves where it's a long enough period of time so that it's substantive, but it's not so long so that the mind wanders, so that on day 22 you say to yourself, oh, I've forgotten all about it. It's a very, very fixed time. And I think that I'm sure there's probably cognitive research that would speak to some of this, but I think that probably it's a period of time that just pushes us to the limit of our attention span in terms of what we're able to come back to very specifically in a very concerted, concentrated way and manner. So it's substantial, but it's also fixed enough so that it helps guard against the mind wandering or the morale lagging or some other pretty shiny object passing my horizon line and distracting me. It's a very useful exercise.
And one of the things I like is 10 days doesn't give it enough time to be watered down, so to where we're still going through the motions, but we're not bringing the emotion behind it, which to me is everything. It's got to be the energy.
Got to be the energy. It's got to be emotional energy. And this is why, and I wanted to come back to something that we were talking about earlier, alluding to earlier, the importance of a sincere aim. The importance of a sincere aim really ramps up the emotions involved, and the emotions drive us. I mean, we are so creatures of emotions. We like to think we're rational. We like to think we have something called willpower, but 90% of the time we're operating on emotion. You can learn things in the most unusual places. And I learned something yesterday, or at least I had an experience of affirmation of something that I already believed, but it came to me in a new way. And it was helpful to realize that somebody vastly separated from me in geography, in culture, and in mindset had a similar thought. I am participating in a documentary about horror films that are supposedly cursed. This includes The Exorcist, Poltergeist, The Omen, the Twilight Zone movie, horror films where terrible, terrible things occurred or terrible events reoccurred on the set or to the cast and crew. And legendary has developed around some of these movies that they were somehow cursed. Whatever one may make of that, that's the topic of the documentary, and I'm being interviewed for it tomorrow, actually. So the producers gave me a task, and that task was to binge watch all of these so-called cursed horror movies.
And it was terrific. A hero, Mitch.
I actually spent Thanksgiving binge watching horror movies, and I had a very good time, actually. And it was fine because it's for work. It's for work. It's not some petty indulgence. And so I enjoyed it very much. And one of the horror movies that they recommended to me, that they asked me to watch, was one I had never heard of before. Get this. It was a Soviet horror movie called Stalker that was made in 1979. And the name of the director is escaping me. Forgive me. He's quite famous in the film world, but the name is just escaping me. But it can be found on Amazon. It's a really classic, hardcore Soviet horror sci-fi movie called Stalker. And the theme of the movie is this. These people are in what seems to be a post-apocalyptic world. There's tremendous suffering and lack and loss in the world. And somewhere there is this place called the zone, the zone. And if you can enter the zone, you will be granted your deepest wishes and desires. And there is the protagonist of the movie is a man who's called a stalker, and his job, which is illegal, is to bring people into the zone where they can have all their wishes fulfilled. And it's extremely dangerous because a lot of people die trying to get in the zone. It's this morphing, ever-changing environment that seems to respond to thought. And people go in there and they have chaotic thoughts and they get in a lot of trouble and they very often lose their lives. So it's very perilous. And at one point, I guess you could almost say this is the denouement of the movie. The stalker is talking about his predecessor, the guy who trained him, the guy who he was a mentor to. And his predecessor committed suicide. And this is so fascinating. It's very dark, but it's fascinating. His predecessor went into the zone after years and years of experience, guiding people in there, but never going in with a wish of his own, never actually trying to use the powers, the strange powers of this place. Well, one day he decides he's going to make this dangerous trip into the zone with his own wish. And his wish is to bring his dead brother back to life. But he goes in and actually he doesn't revive his dead brother. What he does, we're told, is he receives mounds and mounds of money, great riches, because the wish, he was lying to himself. The wish that he really went in with was for wealth, not to bring back his deceased brother. And he was so shocked when he was forced to come face to face with his true nature that he committed suicide. He received all this wealth because the zone, in effect, read his real wishes and his real desires, and he wasn't being frank and honest with himself. And the shock was so overwhelming that he committed suicide. And I thought, this is extraordinary because this director existed in another time, in another place, in another culture, facing different concerns. And yet we as human beings, we do come to agree with one another. We do come to rotate around a certain set of truths. One of the things I've always urged people, I urge myself, I write about in the new book, is that you must be frank with yourself about what your goal is. There is no other way to know yourself, to harness your possibilities, your mental energies, and what is the purpose of living with a noble lie? Now, this protagonist in the film, he may have wanted to bring his brother back to life, and that's a noble and good thing, perhaps. But what he really wanted in his heart was riches. And he was never able to face it, and it killed him. It killed him, his inability to face it. So the zone is really a metaphor for the degree to which we are able or unable to come to terms with our deepest desires. And just think of it. This movie came out of Soviet Russia. It had to go through censors and, all kinds of things. And really, what it was espousing was a fairly key principle of New Thought. It was espousing it in a different way. You'd watch that movie and you'd consider it a very dark movie, and yet its message is not far at all. In fact, it comports very well with some of our conversations here, and that is the absolute importance of facing what you want in life. You may not like it, you may like it, whatever the case may be, you have to at least go through the steps of self-disclosure, of self-revelation. Because if you don't, this movie warns in the grimmest of terms, if you don't, it's tantamount to losing your own life. If this other stalker, if this predecessor had come to terms with the fact that what he really wanted was money, well, it would have changed his life. I don't know that it would have made him a happier man, but at least it would have made him recognizable to himself when he looked in the mirror, so to speak. It wouldn't have driven him to the despair of suicide. And of course, there are good reasons to have resources, even in Soviet Russia. He may have been able to do very good and necessary things with those resources, or he may have just wanted to have a good time. He might not have felt good about himself, but undoubtedly he wouldn't have faced that sense of despair of realizing that he had lived life as a stranger. So there's so many reasons, of which we're just touching on a few, of really coming to terms with what your truest and most authentic aim in life is. It's everything in a certain sense.
This is huge. I can see you hopping up and down on the couch. How excited you must have been watching this
Thrilled.
movie.
I was like, I must share this on Inspired Nation. I was thrilled. Yes. Yeah.
So there are a few thoughts coming to mind here. Let's see if we can bring them all together. We often have chaotic thoughts, and so understanding our sincere aim and what we really want can be difficult. It
Yes.
makes me think of Don Miguel Ruiz, Four Agreements and Domestication, which is he talks about us having a government in our mind, kind of a judge and jury. You have the president, you have the Congress, you have the judiciary that are all upholding rule sets that are not ours.
Yes.
And so this gentleman may have had rule sets in his mind, maybe even from the Soviet government, maybe from family, that says seeking money is not a good thing to do.
Yes. Yes.
And he wasn't able to separate. So where I'm going with this is many more of us may actually know what we want. And I call it getting in alignment. Maybe he would have felt better if he had allowed himself to get in alignment. But we have to address what are the rule sets that are not ours to move past the chaos, to allow ourselves to entertain what we really, truly want.
Yes. Yes. And a person may arrive at a realization of what he or she really truly wants and may not like it or may not feel that it's practical. And I would challenge somebody on that, and I would say, well, let's look at that together. But even if you come to that perspective, at least you know, and at least you say, well, okay, I can't climb Mount Everest or whatever it is, but I can do this. At least you know. And I'm struck by something else that I want to share with the Inspire Nation family, and that is the importance of not confusing means with ends, not confusing the vehicle that you're going to use for the actual thing itself that you want. And I'd like to tell a story that was shared with me by a friend of mine named Dean Radin, who is a great ESP and psychical researcher, a close friend. And this is in the Miracle Club, and I was very struck with it. A few years ago, Dean had completed an experiment on precognition, and he had gathered mounds and mounds of data, which he needed to organize. And there was a specific computer program run by a specific language that he wanted to use to organize this precognitive neurological data. He did not know how to use the language that the program was written in, and he simply did not have time to learn. He also needed help in general with the input and the organization of all this data. So he was facing a big difficulty where first of all, he needed somebody who was proficient in the language in which this program was written so that it could be used. And he needed somebody with a background in the neurosciences who could help him sort through this data, input and organize this data into the program. He also needed somebody who would basically do it for free because he had no more money left from his grant and his budget in this experiment. And to top it all off, he needed somebody who had some kind of a academic background in neurosciences who was willing to risk his or her reputation by coming involved with psychical research, which is not an easy thing to do on any college campus or in a professional setting. So Dean was asking himself, how can I get what I need? And he was thinking, well, gee, maybe I can get a graduate student somewhere who can help me out. Maybe I can apply for a grant and I can use that grant to hire somebody. He was trying to kind of sort through his options. And an assistant of his said, listen, you're going about this the wrong way. Instead of thinking about the means that will get you to what you want, focus on what is the very thing that you want. And he said, well, I need someone with a background in the neurosciences who knows this computer language, who can help me enter this data, period. That's what I need. And she said, then just focus on that. That's the end point. That's what you need. Just direct your thoughts, focus, and energies on that. So he did. Within days, a visitor came to his lab who was a tenured neuroscientist from the University of Toulouse in France. He wanted a tour of the lab, and he said he wanted to volunteer his services to Dean to help him with his experiment. But here's the best part. This was the very guy who had written the computer language that Dean did help him. Yeah. Yeah. Can you believe this? Not, Dean is just thinking, well, gee, I need somebody who's proficient in this language. This was the guy who had written the language, who's a tenured neuroscientist at the University of Toulouse, who's interested in psychical research, who wants to volunteer his services. And because he's already tenured and has an established reputation, he can get involved with a controversial field. And Dean said to me, he has had synchronicities like this or actualizations like this occur several times as soon as he got very, very clear on exactly what he wanted. So don't confuse the means to the ends. If you want to visit Paris, you might keep thinking, gee, I need my friend Michel to invite me to Paris to stay at his apartment, and I need to have enough points so that I can purchase a ticket from Delta, and da-da-da-da. You're thinking of means. You're thinking of means. Dean's lesson is you must think of ends and think of precisely what you want. But I must add one thing to this, and this is a very important note. One must never underestimate the degree of labor and sweat equity that someone like Dean Radin has put into his work. It wasn't just an extraordinary story of Dean saying, gee, I wish somebody would give me a pony for my birthday. It was Dean putting in years of effort, of grant requests, of laboratory research, hours and hours spent in very tough, rigorous clinical conditions. He had invested so much of his own inner material in the work that he was doing that there was already, I would say, some kind of an extraordinary balance and priming of equity within Dean's personal account, so to speak, so that he was ready to receive what he wanted because he himself is a scientist who attracts good colleagues, attracts support. All I'm really trying to say is, yes, you must be exquisitely focused, but hand in hand with that exquisite focus, there still has to be an enormous amount of training or investment or sweat equity. And Dean is just a model of that paradigm.
Thank you. And you must also, I believe, let go of it's one that I keep talking with people about lately, the can't. Let go of there's no way this can happen.
Yes. And thank you for reminding me of that, because I'm plagued by that can't myself. I'm always telling people, and I believe that a wish or an aim, okay, to be an authentic aim, it must be actionable. You must be able to do something that takes you in that direction. And I agree with that. But that's no reason for small bore thinking. What you've just said is so very, very important. Dean never would have dreamt that, he's looking for a grant to hire a graduate student who might know the language. The guy who wrote the language, who's a neuroscientist, shows up at his door. Had he been small bore about it, like said, okay, I just want a graduate student to help me, well, maybe he would have gotten that. Maybe he would have gotten nothing. But there's so much to be said for bigness and boldness of thought. I just want people to also be able to think of ways that they can take steps in that direction, whether it's training, however small it is. Something should be actionable. Something there should be actionable.
Very cool. Thank you. So I'm going to take us in a completely different direction, because you were talking, I think you had actually mentioned ponies and birthdays. And it is somebody I know's birthday today. And
who could that be?
I have no idea. So I want you to address that.
Meatloaf?
Yes. Who we were talking about in the beginning of the show? Maybe Ayn Rand or Sid Vicious.
There, actually.
Yeah. what does it mean to you, and what is whenever I think about a birthday, there's always some little shift that I think about for this coming year, or some theme or anything of the sort that takes place. What's going on with you?
Wow, heavy, heavy question. I know that I want to get more in touch with myself physically. That's a theme for the coming year. I know I want to be writing and expressing myself more freely and completely, not feeling bound in any way by peer pressure, including peer pressure that is felt from gatekeepers of mainstream places. I write for mainstream places, I write for subculture places. My aim is always to use the same voice when I'm writing for both these places. I don't want to segment my message because I think something sounds too weird or too strange or too far out, for the people over on the mainstream side of the street. I want integration. I want integration physically, intellectually, emotionally, as much as possible in everything that I do, which really means not hiding from anything, anyone, anytime. And I must tell you, boy, some of the greatest satisfaction that I have felt in life has come recently over dropping any wish to appear respectable or any wish to gain the confidence of somebody whose favor I wanted. I've had people occasionally in academia come to me and say, you're getting too weird. You're going to mess up your reputation. Do you know how completely wrong they have been? The weirder I get, the more my academic reputation grows.
That's cool.
I have my first academic appointment. I'm a lecturer in residence at the University of Philosophical Research in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. The New York Public Library just renewed my fellowship for 1 year as a writer in residence. I had a piece published 2 days ago in the Washington Post. I'm participating in a very big anthology that's coming out from the academic publisher Brill on Gnosticism and American spirituality that's coming out in July of 2019. Recently spoke at a conference at Rice University, and so on and so forth. So, weirdness, as the mainstream defines it, has not proven any barrier whatsoever in my ability to enter the so-called mainstream or academia deeper and deeper and deeper, while at the same time ramping up all of my experiments in circles of spirituality, circles that support and encourage the inner search. I've been able to do all these things, and it's very relaxing in a certain sense to not feel that I have to cater to one constituency or another. So I guess one of the answers to your question is that integration, expressing myself in the fullest range of ways, intellectually, physically, emotionally, without feeling the need for anybody's approbation or anointment of respectability.
The word that comes to mind is authenticity.
Yes, perfect. Yep, I like it. And exhausting my paradigm. That's also going to be a goal for the coming year. Yeah.
So, and I feel like segueing there to we've got a joint celebration. I believe this will come out. It's geared to come out next Wednesday. With you, I always tend to want to bring things out early, but that would make it not the 1000th show, but the 998th show. Exhausting our paradigm. We hit our 1000th show when this comes out next Wednesday. And it's definitely an opportunity to step back. It's so many things about intention, about stepping forward, about looking from where we came, from really a quite humble beginning. Jessica's childhood bedroom, 2 beds side by side, can't sleep in the same bed, totally wiped out, the whole works. And then, all right, I know that when I cross that 1000 threshold, things change. And I get to be extra. I think the energy goes up 10x. I get to be extra careful of where I wanted to go. And I have to say, you have exhausted a paradigm. Time to allow things to morph. Where can the spaceship go?
Wow. That is an incredible question and challenge to put yourself in front of. You have a wonderful audience. Your audience, I find, is enormously intelligent, capable, and practical. They're people who really are searching for a practical philosophy to live by, a philosophy of spirituality, a philosophy of ethics, philosophy of self-development, of motivation. I think that what you're doing is reaching just the perfect growing group of people. So the question that you will face, and I'll be fascinated to watch where you go with this in the coming months, is, what will it mean to exhaust your paradigm? What will it mean to exhaust your paradigm? What direction will that take you in? And it's a very, very interesting question. It's funny. I've done 2 seasons of a talk show called One Simple Idea, which was on the New Thought channel. And the New Thought channel is no longer in existence, but many of these shows will be going up on YouTube and people will be able to see them. And I've interviewed some people who were fairly famous, like Deepak Chopra, some people who were lesser known. And I know that I can almost count on one hand, frankly, the number of interviews I had with people where I felt they were responding to me in a really, truly authentic way, rather than reciting a stump speech or rather than giving me examples that they had used 10,000 times before. And just speaking from my own perspective, I know that if I were to do another season of that show, I would want to come up with ways, and I'm only speaking, for myself, I would want to come up with ways that I could break through anybody giving me an answer that smelled of catechism or rehearsal or sloganeering. Because boy, oh boy, I mean, familiarity really closes things down for us. I couldn't live with myself if I ever felt I was responding to you and responding to your viewers in a way that was just kind of tossing off slogans or something, because then my own search is shut down. Then I'm just kind of a politician almost, or some sort of a performer. And man, we mustn't, in this alternative spiritual culture of ours, we mustn't slip into trite answers. We mustn't slip into orthodoxies or catechisms, and they can sneak in really, really easily. So I'm always trying to bust that up in myself when I can.
So I call it putting a monkey in the wheel.
Yeah. Shake it up, shake it up. And I also want people, and starting with myself in the spiritual culture, to be able to acknowledge failure. There has to be a place for talking about failure. And that could be very fruitful, because it could be that a certain method is not working for me. For example, I've been corresponding with some people lately about sigil magic and other things that are used in chaos magic. Now, I really respect and honor sigil magic, but
can you give us the two sentence version?
Of course. The idea of sigil magic is that you're supposed to make up some sort of a symbol with no meaning, that serves as a stand-in, in effect, for what your desire is. And then you bring yourself to some sort of a highly pitched emotional or physical state while meditating on this symbol, this meaningless symbol, and then you forget about it. You forget all about it. And it's supposed to bypass, this is one aspect of it. There are others. It's supposed to bypass both the kind of rational filters of the psyche and give you the feeling, invest you with the feeling of the fulfillment of your desire, which is kind of the holy grail of New Thought in a way. We're searching for ways to attain that sense of feeling that we've received what we wanted, and that seems to be a way of harnessing the psychical energies. I have never had success with this method, although many people swear by it. And I have been written to and had a fruitful dialogue with others who have tried it and failed and have not had success with it. And then I've had a dialogue with some people who have had success. And it's all very interesting, because frequently in New Thought, and this pertains to the thought of Neville, we want to maintain the feeling state of having received, of having undergone fulfillment of our wish. Sigil magic, or this aspect of chaos magic, is different in that you want to experience the feeling of fulfillment all kind of in one climax and then dispense with it. Don't walk around thinking about it, because in light of this method, thinking is the equivalent of hoping, which is actually not being in a state of possession. And I get it, and it makes sense to me, and I honor it. I bow to it. I've tried it. I may try it again. I have failed. I have failed in using it up to this point. I can only surmise that it may very well be a royal road, the same way that Neville is a royal road, but it just doesn't speak to my psyche. And it cannot be, it just cannot be that one method is right and one method is wrong, and it's that simple. You know, one of the guys who wrote a terrific book on sigil magic said that he used to be a mainstream Christian, and for him, the problem with Christianity was that he was always walking around in a state of hope. And when you're in a state of hope or in a state of faith, you're not in a state of actually having received. You're in a state of really wishing that you'll receive. And I grok to what he's saying, and I get to what he's saying, and yet 4 blocks from here at St. Agnes Catholic Church, somebody could kneel in front of a saint statue, say a devotion to that saint, and get exactly what he or she wanted. And that does happen. So what went on? What occurred? Let's look at that together. I don't want to make another person's path wrong. I want to talk about failure from the perspective of, what do I need to do? What do I need to try? What might suit my psyche in the best way? And there are other dimensions to it as well. But I want us to be able to talk about these things very plainly.
I love it. And I call it a kitchen sink approach, which is, and I've
Yes.
tried the sigils. In fact, ironically, two interviews ago, I believe it was, with Dean on the show, we were talking about sigils. And somewhere on my desk, I have a sigil that I wrote down from his show, but I haven't followed through with it.
Yes.
It hasn't been the piece that has either excited me, or I haven't given myself the challenge, and I love challenges, of saying, all right, for the next 10 days or this summer, I guess this past year, I keep giving myself 30-day challenges. I like this 10-day, it's tighter.
Yes,
of
right.
practicing something. And I didn't say, let's give ourselves a sigil challenge and then really put my energy into it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I have put my energy into it, and to the best of my knowledge, I've gotten absolutely nowhere. And yet I may go back to it tonight, and I may come on next show and say, hey, Michael, I had a breakthrough. So, and then we can all learn from one another that way. But I want us to all be really open with one another. Let's experiment together. That's my wish for the coming year.
Beautiful, beautiful. So on that note, I want you to give people a homework assignment. Today's show, the 2 themes are the 10-day miracle challenge and exhausting our paradigms. So around those 2 themes, either of those, what one homework assignment would you give people today?
Oh, wow. Well, here's the homework assignment. And this show is going to air soon enough so that we'll be doing this at the same time. I want people to do the 10-day miracle challenge. I want them to do it with me. Mm-hmm. They can email me. Every Inspire Nation listener, viewer who emails me always hears back. I love your nation. It's wonderful. It's the best nation on earth. It has no borders. Everyone's a citizen in it.
And no taxes.
No taxes. And all you have to do is just say, yeah, I feel like I want in. And you're in. And you can do whatever you want. It's complete anarchy. And so I want Inspire Nation listeners, viewers, to do this 10-day miracle challenge with me. It will be the topic of a future column in Science of Mind magazine. It will be the topic of a future chapter in a new book. Write to me. Tell me what you experienced, including your failures. Write to me and tell me this didn't work at all. You're a crank, but let's work it through together. Maybe there's something I've left out, but I've had at least one extraordinary experience with it. I intend to have another extraordinary experience with it. And it's so simple. There's simply no reason not to do it. So I want everybody, that's the homework. I want everybody to do that with me.
Thank you. And I want to highlight a comment that you just said, or I think it was 4 words that you just said that are so incredibly powerful that if people get nothing else other than this today, they've taken something tremendous with them. With the word I, it becomes 5 words. I intend to have another.
Wow. How wonderful. Right. I just kind of skipped past that. Yes. But I felt it when I said it. Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Thank you. I intend to have another. Yeah. Thank you. That charges me into this exercise wonderfully. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Any last words, parting words? Well, you know, it's the end of the year. Maybe there's something you want to tell people for this last time period. This time period is so precious to me. I'm not a New Year's resolution kind of guy at
Same here.
all.
Same here.
But I do believe in building a head of steam like a locomotive and building momentum and the tools and the foundation for the new year.
Yes. Here is a parting thought from somebody who shares your detachment from New Year's resolutions. They are not for me. They are not for me. Keep in mind at all times and always and everywhere you go that everything you do, everyone with whom you associate, every activity in which you participate is ultimately consensual. It's your choice where to go, who to be with, how to spend, what to do. You may talk about the consequences of making one choice or another, but the consequences should not be conflated with the choice itself.
Yeah.
So, you know, the great Italian novelist Ignazio Silone said, what is basic in life is the choice of one's comrades. You can expand that observation into a universal principle. Everyone you spend time with, including the holidays, everywhere that you go, including your workplace, everything that you spend money on, including life's necessities, is consensual. Nobody and no force on earth can force you to do it. There may be consequences that you'd rather not deal with, and that's understandable. But the consequences may not be what you think they are because you've never probed or challenged them before. But that aside, that cannot be seen as compulsion in and of itself. Think of the fact that everything you do, everywhere you go, everyone you're with is consensual. See what possibilities that opens to you when you take that with utter, dead, total seriousness.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And it makes me think of, it was actually guest number one. Wow. Guest number one we had on the show, Kamal Ravikant, who wrote the book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It.
Wow.
And one of the lines that stuck out to me was, if you want to get fit, surround yourself with outrageously fit people.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah.
We
Wonderful.
are our environments. It's all consensual. It's all choice. And then it all comes back to us as a mirror.
That's wonderful. I love that. I love that. And you can apply that to anything. If you want to get X, surround yourself with those people who embody, exemplify that trait. Yes.
Bingo.
Beautifully put.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Mitch. Taking
Pleasure.
your birthday the day after Thanksgiving.
I love it.
It's
Happy
such
to
an
be here.
honor.
Back at you, and I'm so glad to be on the 1,000th show. That is extraordinary. That's an eon of shows, and congratulations. It's wonderful.
Thank you. As I was telling you before the show, even with bicycle racing, and I raced at the pro level for many, many years, I don't think I had 1,000 races. So it's interesting when we talk about mastery, which I don't feel like I'm anywhere close, but I'm working that direction.
Mm-hmm.
But also, again, going through this portal, I'm interesting to see. It's an arbitrary number. It's completely what we make of it. And yet I know going through this portal, some switch will flip.
Yes, I agree. I agree. It's a number that has occupied a hallowed place in the human psyche for such a long period of time. It's a multiple of a number that's a primary part of our reality, our nature, our earliest, most primeval thoughts, our holiday and seasonal celebrations. It's vital to us in some special way, and I think you're in for a discovery.
So, woohoo!
All right, thank you.
So on that note, for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, begin your 10-day miracle challenge, and begin exhausting your paradigm today, and
right on.
Shine bright. Woohoo!
All right. Thank you, my man.
Thank you so much, Mitch.
Pleasure. I can't wait for more. All right, man.
All right, take
I'll
care.
see you soon. Okay, be well. Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!